Good morning. For the beauty of the earth. What a beautiful day we have with this holiday weekend, and we can enjoy God's creation and enjoy one another and gathering together. We're so glad that you're here with us. If you're in person, we welcome you. We also welcome those who are online, and glad to have each and every one here with you at Elizabethtown Church of the Brethren, where we practice peace, service, and openness to all. We're your pastoral team. Pastor Jason is here, Pastor Naomi is here, and I'm Pastor Pam, and Beth DeGood is on the keyboard, on the piano this morning, and we're grateful for her musical leadership with us this morning. Some announcements. Jason, you have
Sure, I do have a few announcements. The first is, some of you may have noticed as you were coming in this morning that we have the tent is set up out there, and during the summer, from 9:15 to 10:15, we will be gathering there every Sunday for breakfast and conversation, usually some donuts and coffee. We had such a good time doing the NYC breakfast last week that we kind of decided that let's keep this going. So assuming that the weather is nice, we're going to be gathering out there every Sunday from 9:15 to 10:15. So please come out early. Opportunity to hang out in the tent, have some snacks, have some coffee. The playground's right there, so if families want to let their kids run around during that time, that'll be a fun time before the service.
Will there be veggies also?
Veggies?
Yeah.
No,
Oh.
I don't think. Well, I mean, maybe. So here's the thing, though. Part of this is we just kind of came up with this idea, and we're trying to figure out exactly how to make it work. I've already had some people come up and say that they'd be willing to help. So if you are one of those people who are interested in maybe sponsoring a Sunday and you want to bring veggies, Pam,
I would bring veggies.
maybe along with donuts, but whatever. If you would like to just bring veggies to the 9:15 to 10:15, you can deal with the reality of people's. How they feel about that.
Okay.
They can tell you.
You can tell how he feels about it, right?
I, for one, like the sweet stuff. So,
yeah, it was.
So anyway, yes, if anyone is interested in sponsoring a Sunday or would like to bring donuts one day or would like to bring orange juice or something, please let me know. Reach out. We're trying to figure out how to make this work exactly. So we'll have fun. We'll do it as a community together.
Yeah,
So.
good time of fellowship.
Yeah, it was. It has been. Two other announcements. One is I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because there will be more announcements surely in the weeks to come, but Vacation Bible School is happening August 16th to 19th. Maybe you saw the big sign we have out front. There's more information you can find here on one of these slips, as well as probably on the website shortly. So just note those dates. VBS is happening. And the last announcement is that today, this afternoon, it says this time is a little incorrect. It'll be from 4:30 to 7, gathering at my house today for junior high and senior high. We'll have some food, some games, campfire. So for junior high and senior high youth, we are meeting at my house at 4:30 today. If you come at 4, we'll still welcome you. That's fine.
Sounds like a good 4th of July picnic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I noticed that you are using this handout
I am.
as you think about the announcements. Just want to remind you all that you can pick one of these up each week. It has the week of July 4th for this week, everything that's happening with all of the information. On the back, there's a calendar of events that go beyond this week. Just something that you can have that you can take along. You can tuck it in your Bible. You can take it home and put it on your refrigerator. It'll give you a lot of information, everything that's happening. So I encourage you to pick these up. They're usually on those tables in the back as you leave the sanctuary, but there are also a bunch of them in the literature rack out in the lobby. So help yourselves so that you know what's going on each and every week. Just want to remind you that the Men's Coffee and Conversation is meeting this week, Tuesday morning. All men are invited out at the Garman's home. If you need any information, feel free to call the office or see one of us. And I think those are all the announcements that I have for now. Lots of good things going on.
I have one.
You do?
I do, yeah. So one of the roles that I've taken on is coordinating worship, our worship experience, and we are encouraging and inviting musicians among you. There was an email this week, and I heard a few people didn't get it. So part of this announcement is if you are not getting emails from the church, or if you're not getting prayer requests from the church, contact the church office and they can make sure you haven't been accidentally unsubscribed. That's a terrible, terrible thing. But musicians, if you are interested or willing or able or know someone who is interested or willing or able to accompany, sing, be part of an ensemble, play a solo, the kazoo, I mean, well, you know.
Really?
Well, I don't know.
I could do that.
Okay. Okay, so anyway, the invitation is extended and we
Only
invite you.
high-quality kazoo players.
High quality kazoo. High quality kazoo. You have to be electronic kazoo so that our live stream friends can hear it.
Oh, wow. That sounds a little too high.
Anyway, you get the idea. We invite you to share and contact the church office.
Good.
Yeah.
And today.
Today.
The theme today.
Yeah. So this is our last week of the space between, our liminality series. Endings can be hard. Mm-hmm. Endings can be a little confusing and disorienting. And the ending of Mark is particularly interesting. So we're going to spend a little time with that this morning and think about what we do when endings are tough.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Welcome to worship, everybody. We're so glad that you're here. We have a women's Bible study that meets many months during the year, not in the summer, but during the school year. And they often share prayers. And there was a prayer that Chris Bucher, the leader of that group, shared with the group that's very meaningful. It's called God of the Earth. The author is Bill Wallace. He lives in New Zealand. But as I was working with this prayer this week, it reminds me of the Lord's Prayer in different language. So I would just invite you to hear these words as our call to worship. O most compassionate life giver, may we honor and praise you. May we work with you to establish your new order of justice, peace, and love. Give us what we need for growth, and help us, through forgiving others, to accept forgiveness, and for ourselves also. Strengthen us in the time of testing that we may resist all evil. For all tenderness, strength, and love are yours, now and forever. Amen. The ensemble will come and lead us in music this morning, and you are invited to join in as you can in this song about thresholds.
We're doing the same song we did last week, so you know it. So hopefully, why don't we stand up, those who are able, and let's sing together.
Face
All right. I would like to invite and if there's any children out in the sanctuary, you can come on up. Do you want to come up, Oliver? Let me show you something. Come here. Okay, don't touch it. Okay, so we are going to do something pretty neat as a church later, but you guys won't be in here, so I wanted you to see how this works now. One of the things we're talking about as we go through our lives and things as we think about what's next and what's happening and what's new. Lots of times there are things in our lives that happen that make us sad, that maybe don't make us feel good, that we worry about, that we think a lot about. And when we think about them, sometimes we get kind of trapped in those thoughts and extra sad, and it's hard to move on to new things. Oliver, has that ever happened to you before? No? Probably not, no. No, so it has. So this is what we're going to do. One of the cool things is Oliver's right here, Winnie. So one of the ways that we can visualize this is a pretty neat thing. So when we think about, first of all, it's really important to remember that it's okay to have those emotions. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to not feel good about something. But sometimes we can get stuck in that sadness, and it's hard to move on, and it's hard to do something new. And there's always something new to do. There's always something fun to experience, and it's important for us to have the opportunity to be sad and to feel those feelings, but to not get stuck in that sadness too, and to move on. And so one of the things that we're doing this morning here, look at this, bud. One of the things we're doing this morning is a way for us to kind of leave some of those things behind. Now, I want you to watch this piece of paper. You ready? If this is I wrote down sad. Do you see that? I wrote down sad on that piece of paper. And if we put it in the water, look at that. What happened? Where'd it go? So here, I want you to drop a piece of paper. This is like a normal piece of paper, right? Okay, so put that in. Oh, do you want to see? You want to see it too? Okay. Here you go, Win. Here, just drop it in there. Yeah. One more? Okay. Okay, here you go. So sometimes we put, oh, that's the last one. So we put those things in there and watch what happens. Watch what happens. All gone. So it's helpful for us to remember that when those things happen, that we'll have the opportunity later today to put them into the water and we can watch them disappear. Now, they'll always still be with us, but this allows us a chance to move on and do something new. Sound good? Oh, okay. Yeah, it's gone.
As we come to our time of prayer, there are a few things that we can hold especially in our prayers. And one of those is learning what it means to be the church in a post-pandemic society that we've been talking a lot about, and also what it means to have an online congregation. And so we are having a get-to-know-you, new friends gathering via Zoom this noon. And we ask for prayers as we discover together how do we be the church in these times. Also asking for prayers for those of us who will be traveling to annual conference. Next Sunday at this time we'll be in Omaha, Nebraska, or close. And we certainly want to remember all those who will be traveling, and we think of our leadership, especially as they're preparing for these meetings. Again, how can we best be the church together? Well, I have a prayer I would like to read this morning. It's about being a semblance And I thought, now what is an assemblance? It's kind of a likeness. You know, in some ways we're very diverse, but in many ways we're very similar. So that would make us a semblance. And especially as we grow and learn together and we can become more like Jesus, we are a semblance together. So I invite you into some moments of silence, and we'll close that time with a spoken prayer. God, we gather as a semblance of your people, divided and distracted by the things we want to win, the lists to which we tend, the people we aim to love. And though it is still morning, we have already felt afraid or lonely. We have already bartered with the world. We have already gazed with disappointment against disappointment in systems, neighbors, and self. We gather as a semblance of your people, scarred by the blunt force of scarcity, sneaking and striving for our fair share and then some. God, we gather as a semblance of your people with a twinge of apology, for we look like mere remnants of your delight. And yet, these pieces are your pieces. You have been known to create order from chaos, to decide with a breath that we are very good. We gather as a semblance of your people to hear your voice, move through the fear and isolation with a familiar declaration too often misplaced. We are loved, we belong, we are useful to you. And since it is still morning, there is light to guide us further together, because morning no longer threatens our sense of time and worth. Now it is a warm and gracious vantage of your Spirit, the one who helps us hear heaven, tearing in with a word that can make a semblance whole. Amen.
This congregation is very generous in any number of ways, and I wanted to share with everyone that last Sunday we had an NYC fundraiser. This was our breakfast that we had outside, and thanks to the generosity of the folks who attended that, and even some folks who didn't but still felt like giving, we were able to raise $1,700 for our NYC fund, which is amazing. And one of the things that's, I think, great about this is that when we hear about an NYC fundraiser, I'm sure people have heard that over and over and over again. It's kind of this constant mantra for our youth group, because we go on this trip every 4 years to National Youth Conference. And it's wild to know that in just a couple weeks, we are going to be going on that trip together. And I wanted to thank you all for your generosity, for providing for that trip. And I know that you see NYC fundraiser all the time over the last 4 years, and are continuing to give generously towards that. And I'm very thankful. And the youth, all the 14 youth and 5 advisors that are going, are very thankful for your generosity for making that happen. That is just one of the small ways that this congregation continues to give, not just to our general budget, but to special projects and to special offerings like National Youth Conference. So thank you.
Out of the darkness and the deep, out of the muck and the mire, the mud and slush, we will emerge together. The days without forward and future will be a distant memory, only a story told as a reminder, a marker of where we've been distant and separated from each other, from our humanity and breath, from our warm embraces and tender touch, buried beneath our own sense of self in exclusion to anyone else. We will arise and we will receive a new heavens and new earth, new vision and new bounty, for this land is desolate no more. Not by hands choking, beating, and breaking it, but through our connection to it. Connections drawn together by the spirit of breath, spirit of life, well of vitality. Arise with the one who stood and sat and slept in the darkness with us. Arise with the one who bore our diseases, who hid our shaker, hatred, othering, animosity toward each other and the divine.
To anyone because they were afraid. The end. No, seriously, that's the end. Was it what you expected? What you're familiar with? In case you don't believe me, I'm going to invite you to take that red Bible out from the pew right in front of you. If you're online, feel free to Google it. Mark 16, verses 1 through 8. In the print Bibles here in the sanctuary, I'll even give you the page number. It's number 1067. Mark 16, 1 through 8. I used the NIV on the slides, so it matches what's in those Bibles. Verse 8. Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. And then what does it say there in the Bible right after verse 8? The most reliable early manuscripts and other ancient witnesses do not have Mark 16, 9 through 20. So that's where the original text ended, right after verse 8. Well, that's odd. I mean, both odd in the way that it ends as originally written, which we'll talk about more in a moment, but also odd in that there's a whole bunch of verses here that are not in the earliest manuscripts. So first, some things that are important to know. There are no existing original copies of any of the biblical books. Everything that scholars have to work with is a later manuscript, which essentially just means a copy of something that was an older writing. Most scholars agree that the Gospel of Mark was the earliest of the four and was likely written in the late 60s CE, not the 1960s, the original 60s, before the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple in 70. There are allusions in this book of Mark that are likely connected to those historical events. For comparison, Matthew and Luke were probably written about 20 years after Mark, still in the first century but a bit later, and John was probably written a few years after Matthew and Luke. So that's also just a reminder that these Gospels were not synchronous, simultaneous accounts of Jesus' life. No guy with a papyrus following Jesus around, taking notes. No documentary-style camera. This isn't like the Office Jesus edition. In fact, the earliest Greek manuscripts, copies, that still exist today that include the Gospel of Mark are dated from the following 2 or 3 centuries. And in those, Mark ends at verse 8. Scholars generally agree that we don't have anything more original or dependable than that. After those manuscripts, there begin popping up later copies that have other possible endings. It almost, but not quite, is like those books I used to read as a kid. Choose Your Own Adventure. Have you read some of those? Think they're actually still making them. I found this one that looks like it is a very recent publication. There is no unicorn involved in any alternate ending to Mark. I'm going to get off that slide real quick. You want to maybe put it back on the main slide. I don't want to suggest something like that. But in many Bibles, you will find either what is called super creatively the shorter ending, which is not even in the version that you have in the pews, or the longer ending, verses 9 through 20, as you see them in this Bible. Both of these endings are almost universally considered to not be original to the text of Mark, added by later scribes, copiers, or church-connected folks. Both of these endings, other alternate endings, attempt to resolve this challenging and uncomfortable ending in verse 8. They bring in some concepts and pieces of a story that are more theologically compatible with the other Gospels, Matthew, Luke, John, which of course, by now, in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th centuries, were also in wide circulation. Is it possible that there was another ending of Mark that somehow got chopped off or lost? Given the passage of time and the means by which these texts multiplied and were copied, it seems like it could be possible, but there's really no evidence of that beyond that general discomfort that this could actually, in fact, be the ending as intended by the original author, who, by the way, may or may not have been named Mark. I mean, it's a great name. I have a personal affinity for it, but there really is no textual evidence of the specific author either. So back to this original ending, where the women fled, were afraid, and told no one the end. Why does it leave us scratching our heads? A few weeks ago, when we were looking at the beginning of the Gospel of Mark, I mentioned that Mark does not include the birth of Jesus, the angels, the shepherds, the wise men, Mary and Joseph. Well, we see here that the ending of the Gospel of Mark is also very different from the other Gospels. You may remember in Matthew, Luke, and John such details as angels in dazzling clothes, the women leaving the tomb with fear and great joy, and sharing the good news with the disciples. Jesus appears to multiple people in a variety of places in the other Gospels, including a room with no open doors and on a fishing trip. Jesus gives instructions and assurance of his Spirit to his followers and visibly ascends to heaven. The end. But not in Mark. No joy, no sharing of the news, no appearances of Jesus, no instructions from Jesus. The message to the women by the young fellow in the tomb is, number 1, Jesus is risen and is not here, and number 2, go tell the others that you can find him in Galilee, as he already told you. But they are trembling and bewildered and afraid. In other translations, terror and amazement had seized them. They were confused and shaking with fear. They were overcome with terror and dread. The message? They got out as fast as they could, beside themselves, their heads swimming. Stunned, they said nothing to anyone. Confused, flabbergasted, gobsmacked, paralyzed, silent. This is a liminal space, an in-between space that the women find themselves, caught between their previous understanding of the life of Jesus and a new understanding that is just beginning to be revealed. In between life as they knew it and new life potential that is surprising, worrying, perplexing. I wonder if they are thinking, how dare we move into something new when we are still grieving that which was? That space can create anxiety, but also creativity. It can create fear, but also new revelation. Scholar and theologian Gail O'Day writes the following about this section of Mark. In the face of theophany, a revelation of God, silence is not a failed or inadequate response. Silence is a wholly appropriate response because the women's silence creates a space for the voice and presence of God to resound. What adequate words can the women speak that would not trivialize the moment, that would not make the empty tomb into a story about what they have seen instead of being a moment about what God has done? The women's restraining and Mark's parallel restraint in recounting the Easter story combine to create and allow a moment of holy awe for the reader of the gospel. There is power in the silence to allow God's presence to become known, to allow God to work, to allow space for the mystery and awe that connect us to the sacred presence and activity of God. I've asked a few questions during this series about liminality. Earlier in June, I asked, "Why are you here?" Last week, I asked, "Who do we say Jesus is, and who would Jesus say we are?" And today I ask, what is God doing here in this new beginning? We can mourn the past, our points of pain, our frustrations, and lament what used to be, and that is natural and normal and human, and space is allowed for that. But let's not get so hung up there that we are not able to be here. What new thing is God about? What is stirring, perhaps not even yet formed into words, maybe just sensed? Energy that is beginning to bubble up somewhere, creativity that is emerging in this space in between. What does Mark have to say about it? It seems like he says pretty much nothing. The women are trembling, bewildered, afraid, and they fled the tomb. They didn't just leave, they fled and said nothing to anyone. The end. And yet, this is obviously not the end. I mean, it's the original end words of the Gospel of Mark, but it's not the end of the story. We wouldn't all be sitting here if it were the end of the story. As we read this ending to the Gospel of Mark, we forget that there is another character present, us, the people of God, the followers of Christ. We are seeing and reading and hearing and feeling it all, which begs the question, what is our role? What is ours to do? How are we to share the good news? I pulled out the textbook that I used in my New Testament, bless you, class at Bethany with Professor Dan Ulrich. And I have a note in the margin when we discussed this ending, no doubt from the words of Dan Ulrich himself, that says, prompts back to Gospel's beginning. And so I went back to the beginning of Mark. Mark 1:1, the beginning of the gospel about Jesus Christ, the Son of God. The beginning of the gospel about Jesus Christ, the Son of God. From the very start, the Gospel of Mark has eased us into a new beginning, a new message of hope, a new way of love, facilitated by that John the Baptist guy, remember him? And fully lived into by Jesus. And when that message, that story is unclear, when we fall silent and aren't sure where to turn, what do? A puzzling or particularly gripping ending often leads us to start again from the beginning, much as we might do when we reach the end of a particularly good novel or television series or movie or poem. Go back to the beginning. Do you know that feeling when you've gotten to the end of a good book or a movie and you just don't want to let it go? You want to know what's next, what happens to the characters, how they develop. There is that moment of liminality between the end of one world and the beginning of another. You are changed by the experience of entering this other world, but the time inevitably comes when the last page or the final screen appears. The end. We want to hear it, read it, watch it again. What did we miss the first time? What is now more clear, more obvious, more instructive now that we know the ending? It's almost a different experience when you read it or watch it again, when you know what's coming next. Small things that you missed the first time start becoming more crystallized. Mark may not tell us that the women or the disciples or others saw the risen Jesus with their own eyes. But perhaps this is even more useful for us 2,000 years later to understand that Jesus is very visible around us, even if we can't see him with our own eyes. His work, and more specifically, his work through us, is the witness that emerges from the silence. The end points to the beginning. The women left, gobsmacked and silent. And then John the Baptist came ahead of Jesus, preparing the way. Jesus goes ahead of the disciples, preparing the way. Generations upon generations of faithful Christians and the earliest brethren and even the founders of this congregation went ahead of us, preparing the way. In what way are we now called to prepare the way, to usher in the good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ, to the world around us? I think it's just the beginning. In order to more clearly see the potential in that beginning, we must continue to work through the things that we continue to carry, the things that weigh us down. We are forever shaped by the moments of life which create pain and sorrow, as well as the moments that create joy and celebration. But we tend to hang on to the challenges and the difficult feelings more readily than the positive memories and experiences. Perhaps this is part of being human. Working through grief does not mean that we forget what has happened in the past and that we do not learn from those experiences. But sometimes, perhaps, we can begin to loosen our grasp. Maybe we don't need to clutch it quite as tightly. We can acknowledge the continued memory of painful life interactions and intersections while also choosing to turn and face forward, moving together down a new path of hope and promise, beginning again. We never run out of those opportunities for a restart. We've purchased some special paper, and at the end, on the inside of each of the pews, you should find a small paper pile of those paper slips and some writing utensils. Now, I mathematically could not predict where people would sit. Some pews will have too much, some pews will not have enough, so we might need to do some passing around. But I would encourage you to pass those down the bench so that everyone has one slip of paper. If we get desperate, some of the larger ones can be torn in half. That's fine, you won't ruin it. And a writing utensil. Hopefully some of you have some. Everyone should have a slip of paper and a writing utensil. There's a couple benches in the center on this side where no one is sitting, so we can grab a couple from there if needed. Is there anybody who if you still need a paper, can you raise your hand? Does everyone have a little paper? And I want to preface this by saying no one else will see your paper. I promise. And I'm going to ask you to take a moment and write on this paper slip something, just one thing, that you grieve, something particularly challenging or difficult for you at this time. It can be something relating to our congregational life together, or it can be something connected to your own personal life or the world around us. Something that you are struggling to release, something that is holding you back. You may not even be sure you're ready to let go of it yet, or at least loosen your grasp. But maybe you sense that your soul is inviting you to do so. Go ahead and write that in whatever words you want to use on that piece of paper. You can even use an image if words fail you. No one else is going to see it, and when you're done, just fold it in half. In a moment, Beth is going to begin playing the piano, and I'm going to ask when that music begins, as you are ready, that you take your slip of paper and find one of the basins around the room. There are 2 here, and I believe there are 2 in the middle, all on the sides, where you can put your paper in and just give it a little stir. There is nothing magical about this activity. What you have written on your paper, the concept, the idea, the pain, will not magically disappear. But it is symbolic, an opportunity to experience individually and all together in this community that we are ready to take the next step in whatever God has in store for us. I hope you find it an opportunity to release, or begin to release, or continue to release that which might be causing you pain, that which might be keeping you stuck in the end. The music that Beth will be playing is the tune to the next hymn we will sing, which will be number 640, and the title is "This is a Day of New Beginnings." We're not going to sing it. She's going to play it a couple times through, and then when I sense that we are all ready, I will come back up and I will start us in singing. I think it's probably a new song for most of us, but hopefully as you hear it, it will become familiar. So for now, we will just listen to the music while we stir our papers in the basins, and when you see the lyrics appear on the screen, you'll know that we will be starting to sing momentarily. Let's just take a moment of prayer before we move into this time. God, healer, creator, Alpha and Omega, end and beginning. Lift our pain and grief, carry it with us, and carry us as we carry it. Prepare us to prepare the way. Ready our hearts for your new beginning. In Jesus' name, amen. 640. For our sending, I'm going to read that last verse again. Christ is alive and goes before us to show and share what love can do. This is a day of new beginnings. Our God is making all things new. Amen.